Hello, my name is Tony Morbin, Executive News Editor at ISMG, and I'm your moderator for today's webinar. Start your API security journey, accelerate secure innovation with Traceable and AWS. Our subject matter experts today are Adam Arellano, Field CTO, Traceable, and Sean Brady, Head of Global Partnerships for AWS Edge and Elemental Media Services, AWS. APIs are the backbone of modern applications, but they're also the number one vector for cyber threats. As businesses scale their applications on AWS, securing APIs without slowing down innovation is no longer optional, it's essential. In today's webinar, we'll break down the evolving API threat landscape and what it takes to protect your applications in the cloud. This will include looking at the latest API security challenges organizations face on AWS, why WAFs alone are not enough for complete API protection, how Traceable's API security platform enhances AWS WAF and Amazon CloudFront, best practices for API visibility, anomaly detection, and proactive security policies, as well as how to implement a layered API security strategy with real-time threat detection. Whether you're just starting to evaluate API security or looking to level up your defenses, we'll be providing you with actionable insights to protect your APIs without sacrificing speed or performance. Before we begin, for those of you unfamiliar with Information Security Media Group, we're a global education and intelligence firm with 30 plus international media sites in vertical sectors such as bank info security, gov info security, and healthcare info security, with more than 1.3 million members registered to our sites. If you have any questions for our speakers during the course of this session, please submit them via the chat window on your screen. And if you experience any technical issues while viewing today's webinar, please use the email address on your screen. Also, I need to emphasize that the content is being presented today is copyrighted material and is meant for today's session and individual study purposes only. So if your organization would like to use the information presented in today's session or looking for customized training or education, please contact us. Now, our sponsors, Harness Traceable. So Harness is the leading end-to-end platform for complete software delivery. It provides simple, safe, and secure way for engineering and DevOps teams to release applications into production. Harness uses AI and machine learning to monitor the quality of deployments and automatically roll back failed ones, saving the time and reducing the need for custom scripting and manual oversight, giving engineers their nights and weekends back. Harness customers accelerate deployments by up to 75%, reduce infrastructure costs by up to 60%, and decrease their lead time for changes by up to 90%. Harness recently acquired Traceable. Traceable's intelligent and context-aware solution powers complete API security, API discovery and posture management, API security testing, attack detection and threat hunting, and attack protection anywhere your APIs live. Also, we're being sponsored today by Amazon Web Services, which began exposing key infrastructure services to businesses in the form of web services, effectively known now as cloud computing. The ultimate benefit of cloud computing and AWS is the ability to leverage a new business model and turn capital infrastructure expenses into a variable cost. Today, Amazon Web Services provides highly reliable, scalable, low-cost infrastructure platform in the cloud that powers hundreds of thousands of businesses in 190 countries around the world. With data center locations in the US, Europe, Singapore, and Japan, customers across all industries are taking advantage of its low-cost, elastic, open, and flexible secure platform. Now, back to our subject matter experts. Adam Arellano is Field CTO at Traceable.ai, where he provides guidance on API security to customers and the industry. With more than 15 years' experience in cloud AI and information security, he's known for building effective cybersecurity programs and teams. A pragmatic advisor, Adam leverages his technical expertise and business acumen to create innovative, secure solutions. Sean Brady is a seasoned business professional and market development leader with more than 11 years at AWS, where he's led global partnerships for AWS Edge and Elemental Media Services. He specializes in driving growth through strategic alliances, business development, market management, and P&L oversight. Sean excels at forging high-impact partnerships that unlock new opportunities with experience spanning Fortune Global 100 companies and startups. So, welcome, Adam, Sean, over to you.
Thanks so much, Tony. Really appreciate the introduction. And so, where we want to start with this is to kind of paint the picture of what the API landscape actually is out there and why it needs securing. I always like to start with the fact that API stands for Application Programming Interface and is a concept that's been around since the early 1960s when computers were first even created. It's easy to forget that APIs actually mean something. And the intended use of an API is to make it easy and manageable to connect two different applications or systems together. Now, because they're so easy to use and because they're designed to be connectors between every system, they're actually much more pervasive than anybody realizes. And while in the past they weren't an attack vector that was commonly used, increasing security posture awareness and better security tools have driven attackers to start using APIs as the new path that they use to attack different systems. That's why, for example, in 2024, we saw a 200% increase in API abuse and related data breaches. Also, about 74% of organizations have experienced API related breaches in the past 2 years. And that's just the companies that knew about the breaches that occurred. It's possible that that number is even higher if they weren't detected. And another interesting little factoid here is that 61% of security professionals predict a growing risk associated with APIs over the next 12 to 24 months. And I am solidly in that camp, and I think that most people should be kind of aware of that. We've also included a couple quick examples that people may have heard about in the news, where an API breach has led to the massive leak of data, whether it be T-Mobile, Shopify, or Optus, who all experienced some kind of data breach in which massive amounts of data were exfiltrated using APIs. And so when we look at any kind of vulnerability or problem, OWASP tends to release a top 10 of all the different vulnerabilities that are associated with a certain segment or part of a system. So for OWASP top 10 for API security, the top 10 vulnerabilities are pretty interesting in how simple they are and how related they are. Now, if you're familiar with these lists, you'll see things that sometimes are brand new and sometimes they're old attacks that have existed for a long time. And I'm not going to go into each one of these, but I am going to point to maybe the simplest one. So if you look at API 2, the second block there at the top, broken authentication. Now, what does that mean? It just doesn't authenticate effectively. In other words, it's like a Gmail account or like your Amazon account that is able to be logged into without any kind of credentials whatsoever, which is something that we've moved way past, since the 1980s and logging into mainframes. But that's still where a lot of APIs are. And what's really crazy is it's not just the second most common type. API 1, broken object level authorization, or BOLA, is another version of broken authentication with a little bit more detail. Also, API 3, API 5, and 6, broken object property level authorization, broken functional level authorization, and unrestricted access to sensitive business flows, are basically the same problem of authentication, but expressed in different terms and more specific terms. And so we have a long way to go if the top 10 issues that people that or vulnerabilities that we're seeing in the API world are simple things like this. So what we're here to talk about today is starting your API security journey. Sean, can you talk to us about how AWS sees the threat landscape writ large?
Sure thing. And thanks, Tony, and thanks for hosting us here. And Adam, appreciate it as well. So I think if you look very similar to probably what Traceable is seeing on the API side, AWS is seeing in what we see as an ever-evolving and expanding threat landscape. At AWS, we pride ourselves on our global infrastructure being the most secure, extensive, and reliable cloud platform in the world. You can see that if we operate across over 36 different regions, we have over 250 different service offerings, and a pretty extensive edge infrastructure that we've built over the last 18 years. And so it's really critical that we're mitigating threats in order to ensure that the millions of customers that continue to use AWS on our platform get that same high availability and performance that's become synonymous with AWS. And so, a few of the ways that we're doing that, we wanted to highlight here. First, because of the scale and size of our infrastructure, we get a really unique visibility into the global traffic profile and really unique new threats that may be emerging across multiple regions and across multiple geographies. And in addition to that, we have a fairly extensive detection system that monitors AWS network traffic and places mitigations as needed to protect the availability and performance of applications that run on top of AWS. And lastly, our network of honeypots collects exploits and attempts that feed basically back into our intelligence on threat actor domain, infrastructure, and activity. And so what you can see here is really this allows us to examine, exabytes of data every minute, mitigate, hundreds of billions of threats a day, and also mitigate thousands of DDoS attacks. And so, as customers run on top of AWS, our goal is to maintain that performance and availability that we talked about. I know, Adam, you guys have chosen AWS to be your preferred infrastructure provider from the cloud standpoint. Maybe it would be great to talk about some of the things that you've done or seen that we're able to do for you that helps kind of that under the differentiated heavy lifting of running a service in the cloud.
Yeah, certainly. AWS was an obvious partner for us. Beyond the basics that AWS has been providing since 2006, which is wild to think that 2006 is how long it's been, but it's a long storied company. But part of it is the visibility, the ability to really get in and figure out exactly what's happening. A lot of what Traceable provides is visibility into already existing logs that are there, and we help extract value from those logs. And as AWS users, where we are actually based on AWS, the reason we've been able to reach, the enterprise level of scale where we're serving some of the biggest financial institutions in the world is because we're able to use AWS to help us scale in a safe and efficient manner that we feel like we can have full observability on.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we'll definitely get into the observability conversation here in a bit, because that's critical for our customers, and I'm sure even more so for yours, of how do they identify what threats are unique to their application and how they mitigate those. So I think one of the other things that I had here and I wanted to talk about is really how does AWS, what are some of kind of like a peek behind the curtain of some of the things that we're doing to ensure that reliability and performance of the infrastructure. So I think one of the things that we definitely see is we put a lot of honeypots and digital decoys within our infrastructure. And what that does is it helps us extract what we call indicators of compromise. And this is like malware binaries or reverse engineer, and it allows us to kind of reverse engineer where those threats are coming from. And so what we do is we take that data and we feed this into multiple of actually our own AWS services. So we're users of our own products. And we also essentially feed kind of a larger ecosystem so we can better secure services for our customer. And this also ensures our internal security protection mechanisms, our monitoring systems, our threat research capabilities, and our incident response workflow are all continued to be industry leading. And so this is one way we keep our commitment as security, what we call here at AWS being job zero. And so I think like one of the things I love to highlight in this area is just like, you look at the sheer volume here, you look at what we're able to do from, viewing 100 million potential threat interactions daily from our digital decoys, 500,000 of those being, classified as malicious. And then the time we can take to actually discover, where that endpoint is or where that threat is. So this allows us actually to work with government agencies, some of our ISP providers, to really highlight, like, instead of just being like taking mitigation factors, we're able to go find the source of these and leverage authorities or government agencies to kind of stop those from continuing to operate. And I think that's one of the unique things that we have been able to do with our infrastructure and service that we operate. I think the last thing we wanted to highlight here and talk about before we get into kind of the details of the services and the underlying mechanisms that we use is how do we talk to our customers about, how to best deliver what we call a layered security approach as they're looking at building applications or operating services within the cloud infrastructure. I think, we'll talk a little more about this, but nowadays modern applications have just a host of microservices operating, and I'm sure, Adam, you see this on the API side, right? These are, extensive API networks, but it's also, extensive containerized, unique containerized microservices running to build that application. And so each one of, CISOs, when we talk to CISOs or, security engineering teams, they need to really view this from a lens of like this layered approach. And, I don't need to use necessarily a screwdriver to nail in a nail, right? Like I have to find the right tool for the right security posture that I need. And so we talk to our customers about really these 5 layers. So one is looking at the network layer. There's a lot AWS, you've seen AWS does there, but there's also things customers need to do. The application layer, like how am I taking insurance of, that I'm mitigating against these SQL injection, cross-site scripting, these more common volumetric type application threats. Third is, and we'll dig, I think, pretty extensively in here today, is there's these emerging threats, right? This API, this bot and fraud that we don't, isn't traditionally handled by, let's say, like a traditional WAF. And in addition to that, we talk a lot to our customers about first, how do they monitor, how do they observe these threats so that they can understand what's coming through their application? And then secondly, like what's their posture management, security management plan? How are they able to mitigate that? Is that through automation? Is that through third parties? Or is that through some form of people services they bring within their team? Adam, do you want to kind of talk more about how I know you guys do a lot of this when you're consulting with customers of how to kind of build out their ideal security posture?
Yeah, certainly. And I think it really mirrors where, or at least fits in well with the way that AWS approaches this. We don't claim by any stretch of the imagination that we can just protect the entire enterprise and nothing bad will ever happen. And AWS realizes that as well, that there are certain areas where you can get some really good protection with native tools, and there's some areas where you need to bring a different tool in to get that kind of visibility. It's kind of like the difference between, an aerial view of a landscape that's going to help you get the general idea of what's happening writ large, but that's not really going to help you get a sliver out of your finger. You're going to need to get a little magnifying glass and some tweezers to get at some of the other problems. And so what we like to do is make sure that we take into consideration the entirety of our customers' technology stack and make sure that we adapt our tool to fit in properly where it needs to be helpful, and where it doesn't need to be helpful, which is different for every customer, we don't need to go there.
Exactly, totally makes sense. And I know we've worked together on joint customers on solving this problem. So, all right, let's move on. I think we wanted to talk next about let's talk about some of the tools that AWS and Traceable have built to deliver customers that layered security approach. Just to highlight real quickly, here is a pretty extensive view of the security services that AWS offers to customers today. Obviously, we could spend hours going through each one of these. I think we want to really kind of plug in today on where we see some of our customers looking at kind of the network and application protections that they need. And so that's what we call kind of this perimeter protection or network and application protection suite of services that we offer here at AWS. And it'll tie directly into the partnership that Traceable and AWS have built on how we've kind of integrated these services together. But if you look at this, these are multiple services that can be tightly coupled together to really kind of build what I say is like your foundational protection for network and application security. And so moving on, like what does that standard application protection look like when it comes to what we recommend for customers at AWS? And that really consists of 3 core products. The first piece of that foundation is CloudFront. So this is our content delivery service. CloudFront provides customers really with a global networking and caching layer, and will help accelerate kind of the delivery of their content. It also acts as a front door to that application or that infrastructure today. And so while it improves performance and availability of your application, it also is being used more and more as a kind of the first layer of defense against threats before they come into your origin or AWS regions. And then over the last few years, we've layered in multiple security tools within that CloudFront network. First, we have AWS WAF, which is our web application firewall. It's your layer 7 standard firewall protections. It allows you to protect yourself against some of the most common web app threats, OWASP top 10, SQL injection, these cross-site scripting attacks. We provide some standard out-of-the-box pre-configured protections. And then we also allow customers to customize based on their unique application needs. And then the third layer of this is AWS Shield, which is our managed anti-DDoS service. We talked about just the thousands of DDoS attacks that we see each day. We mitigated all layers of our infrastructure, but really, like, our preferred protection suite is to take care of DDoS attacks before they even get close to our infrastructure, and that's done with layering AWS Shield into CloudFront. And so, if we look at this, like I mentioned earlier, this is kind of the recommended preferred architecture for anybody that's running on AWS or even a third-party origin or multi-cloud. You can layer all these products in together, and this gives you really a strong foundational application and networking security protection, in which you start to build your foundational services on. Now, where we've gone unique over the last few years is we'll talk about what we've done with Lambda Edge, which is our serverless computing engine. And what this does is allow you to deploy lightweight code at the edge of your network. And so customers use this a lot of ways to modernize their applications. They want to bring more functionality to the edge. This increases the scale of your application, the responsiveness. It also reduces the latency, time to have to go back to origin versus being able to run this at multiple geographic edge locations in the world. But what this has really done is it's allowed us to integrate third-party applications into our edge framework. And this really helps customers when they're looking at, like, how do I layer in, bot, fraud, API security, some of the more advanced threat heuristics that you're going to see out there. It's allowed that to do that in pretty seamless integration path. And so what I'll do is I'm going to hand it over to Adam to talk about what Traceable has done and how they've been able to integrate at Lambda Edge and how that's helped help customers seamlessly integrate their API story within kind of this edge framework. But Lambda Edge has really opened up the opportunity for us to really help customers better use all the tools in the toolkit to take care of their security threats. So Adam, will go ahead and hand it over to you and to talk about how you guys have built that robust API platform and the integrations that you have here with what we've done from the application security standpoint at AWS.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Sean. And what's amazing about the kind of Traceable AWS story here is that with Lambda Edge being a place where you can insert logic, you can insert actual code and processes at the edge of computing means that your customers or the end users of any given application are benefiting from the enhanced security, enhanced performance without taking any kind of hit for traversal across all the different layers as they happen. And so what we've developed at Traceable, among the many different ways that we can actually tool or set up or configure Traceable in our customers' environments, this happens to be the one that's the most straightforward, collects the best information, and really allows AWS customers to integrate Traceable into their stack most seamlessly. So what we've done is we've inserted ourselves at this layer, at the Lambda gateway, so that we can capture all traffic as it comes across without having to spend any extra time, any extra compute processing that before it gets passed along. And aside from just being able to collect this information and alert our customers on exactly what's happening, we also perform analytics there so that we can then pass blocking information for ongoing attacks further into the stack where customers can protect themselves from attacks as they happen. One of the hallmarks of what we're able to do, or one of the things that I'm most excited about, is that we can actually detect small bot attacks Very large bot attacks are easy to see. You can see an entire army coming over a hill pretty easily. But when somebody dressed in black in the middle of the night is creeping through the forest, it's much more difficult. And that's what we like to really find is the low and slow attacks, the ones that are hard to detect using traditional means. And so by integrating at these points, we're able to detect, pass on information, and enable our customers to then block some of these attacks as they happen. Anything else you wanted to add about that, about API security at the perimeter or any of that, Sean?
No, I think you make a great point, and this is where our partnership has evolved. Is the sense that we do a really good job of taking care of that very very large volume attack, and where we've kind of passed on to Traceable is those smaller, more sophisticated or more unique attacks that we're not necessarily able to identify across our infrastructure, and so it's great that we have this ability integrated at that front door.
Yeah, that's great. And so the next kind of step that we want to take in this conversation is starting to talk about how our customers can cover the entire life cycle of their APIs. For sure, what never happens is we're never brought into an environment the day that it's created. The same way that most customers will not go to AWS the day that they actually start their company. It evolves in different ways, and so we never quite see an entire green field. But what we like to do is take our customers through a journey of how they can secure their APIs at every different level. So let's take a look at what it means to do that in a linear fashion. So here you can see covering the whole entire life cycle of APIs really falls into two categories: preventing and then protecting. So basically, as you develop, then test, then optimize, deploy, and defend your APIs, we're there every step of the way. So while developing, we make sure that you can find and fix API vulnerabilities in the design phase. And then if something makes it through business logic or through some mistake, we do have an automated API testing suite that can help you in pre-deployment find any issues instead of making all the way to production. And then we can also prevent API vulnerabilities from reaching production by performing inspections of code as they go forward. And finally, when we do actually get these APIs into runtime, what we like to do is also optimize them. It's not enough just to protect something. You also want to make sure that it's performant, that it's doing what it's intended to do, and also that we gain context from the way that it's operating so that we can take it back to development teams and help them improve the code that they're writing for these APIs. And finally, as we've discussed kind of at the edge, when we're in production, just because you've developed the perfect API that doesn't have any flaws, doesn't mean that the bad guys are going to say, well, okay, you did a great job, we'll stay away. They're still going to try. And so we can block real threats that are targeting applications and APIs at runtime. And again, pass that information along down the stack as we go. Now, what this actually ends up looking like in this slide, and I have to tell you that slides with circles and rectangles and layers like this don't always make me super excited, but it is a good way to show kind of the life cycle approach to this. And it doesn't mean that you have to start in one quadrant or one side of the circle or anything. It just means that this is a complete cycle that needs to happen. And this cycle is also a great way to introduce the way that you will actually eventually secure those APIs. So discovery and posture management is usually where people start. And that's when you first walk into a room that you think might be problematic. You want to take stock of what's there. You want to take a look at attack detection and threat hunting. What do you think people are trying to do, or what do you think bots are trying to do to attack? And how can you detect those attacks? And then when you decide, kind of what those, or when you sense what those threats are, then actually protecting against those threats is super important. And all of this involves API testing at many different layers, both in design, deployment, and then in runtime. And if you get super into that circle, it's got a lot more information, but it basically covers that cycle in general. And so what we've been able to do at Traceable with our platform is at any given time, we've been protecting 500 billion plus API calls protected per month. 500 billion is a lot. And the reason we've been able to scale like that is because we use the infrastructure of AWS to help us meet that demand. And as you can imagine, there are days of the year and times of the day when traffic is increased. The day after Thanksgiving in the United States, for example, we get a little bit more than 500 billion calls through that we have to protect. We find 50,000 critical vulnerabilities each week. 500,000 APIs are monitored across our customer base, and that's growing on a daily basis. And as we get more customers onto Traceable, and especially AWS customers, that only increases. And also, we have detected and blocked 200,000 attacks each month, including from sanctioned countries where nation states have been attacking different computer systems. So it doesn't matter how capable the security solution is if you can't keep up with the demands of the customers and the volume that they see. Now let's talk about how you actually get started with API security. As I said before, we don't walk into companies where they're completely greenfield and they haven't done anything yet. So you have to start somewhere. So first, let's start with a set of questions. Now, this is the same kind of questions that I would ask, like as a new squad leader, as a Marine for a long time, and I would get handed a squad. And so I would have a set of questions I would ask whoever was handing me that squad. How many Marines do I have? Where are they? And what are they doing? First, very basic questions, right? And it's the same thing you want to find out when you're starting your API security journey or your program. First, you want to know how many APIs do you have? Where do they reside? Are they at your edge? Are they internal? Are they, APIs that are going out to external sources? And what are they doing? Where are they connecting to? What are they even active? Are they old APIs or not? And once you're done assessing the actual APIs themselves, then you want to start assessing their security posture. Are they externally exposed? The answer is yes. The answer is always yes. There are externally exposed APIs. Everybody does this. It's part of the basics of the internet these days. The second question is, are there APIs with vulnerabilities or misconfigurations? And at the beginning of your security journey, again, the beginning answer is almost always yes. There are vulnerabilities or misconfigurations. Now, which APIs are handling sensitive data? And Sean, I'm curious if you could take a guess before somebody begins their API security journey. What do you think the most common answer we get here about handling sensitive data?
I'm guessing it's probably no.
Yeah, there's either a falsely confident, no, we don't, or there's an I don't know involved. And either of those isn't a great answer when you're trying to secure APIs. And in theory, you could answer all these questions manually, but in doing so, you would have a single snapshot that's not reproducible. And so what we want to move towards is automation and a sustainable way to perform these. And that's when we get into assessing security controls. So not only like the state of security, but what controls are you going to put in place? And these controls are questions are illustrated by questions like, can you identify and fix API vulnerabilities pre-deployment? Can you identify API security risks in running applications, which is difficult as they're in, fixing the airplane in flight is not easy as fixing the airplane on the ground. Can you detect anomalous and malicious API activity? Can you block attacks targeting APIs? Again, this is very similar to the last set. Even in very mature API security programs, the answers to these questions is usually a resounding probably. We hope so. Even when you've been working at this for a while. So that kind of leads us to the ultimate API security journey, kind of beginning to end. You have to understand that at first, given that this is a threat that's emerging and not every organization has actual protections in place, it's a path you have to walk down, and it's not one that's answered quickly or necessarily easily. Even with a platform like Traceable, we still walk our customers down this path of maturity so that we make sure that we bring them along for the entirety of it. And so we've kind of reviewed a lot of the different concepts that are in this API security journey. So I'm not going to go into everything, but I do want to talk about, the day that you turn on Traceable in your environment, the first thing that we're going to do is data collection. How many APIs do I have? Where are they? Get into visibility of discovery and cataloging. Talk about dense sensitive data flow. What's the application topology look like? And then we have what's called a trace explorer, where you can see the path that information takes between different APIs, because it's rarely a straight line. It's almost always a meandering path. And this is where we get into API posture management, API testing, which is like the second step of maturity, or the first time that you actually get to a point where you're fixing things actively, where you're looking at risk and compliance, you're looking at vuln management, what third-party APIs and exposure what kind of exposure you have through third-party APIs. You look at vulnerabilities in pre-prod, live traffic, we have dynamic application security testing for APIs, and we're even getting to the point with our merger with Harness where our CI/CD integrations are getting even better so that we're meeting the developers where they need to be. And finally, the last step before you reach nirvana of API security is protection. How can you detect attacks and prevent them? Do you have robust security events and alerts that get to your SOC? Are there tools and processes in place and integrations in place that will help you mitigate those attacks? And finally, do you have blocking rules that can be dynamic and in real time? And what that leads you to, and what we call, and we've seen this in quite a few places where they've really put resources and time into their API security. What we want to get to is a center of excellence where you broaden the adoption of these things. You make sure that across product engineering, even all the way through your sales engineers and everyone else, or even through your customers, that everybody's able to adopt these principles. You want to take the reporting that you have so far, all the issues that you found initially, and you want to burn down. And what burn down means is that you go through that exhaustive list and even get to the small little ankle biter things that help you get down to zero problems. And even better, and this is what I get excited about, especially when we're talking about integration with the CI/CD pipeline, is business insights. And this is an interesting thing in the financial services sector, is that beyond just protecting these APIs, if you have true visibility of them, you can even go back to the business and tell the business like, hey, this other company that is hitting our API at a high rate and is only paying for a subscription for X number of megabytes or X number of hits has actually been doing this a lot more. And we should have a conversation with them about how they're being billed. Or this particular API call is making X number of dollars for the business. Why don't we spend some more time optimizing it? Why don't we spend some more time making sure that our customers can log in more quickly and check out more quickly? So then you're not even, as security is normally viewed, you're not just telling people no or that they're doing something wrong. You're actually coming back to them and saying, let me help you do better and do well for the business. And finally, the thing that I also get excited about is secure API development. APIs are very simple, but a lot of very simple things are not easy. It's not the same, right? Complicated things can be easy to accomplish. Very, very simple things, like running a mile in 5 minutes, pretty straightforward. You go in a straight line. But to get there is not necessarily easy. And secure API development is like that. How do you integrate these learnings with the designers, with the product, and with engineering? And so I could go on for a very, very long time about this security journey and my favorite parts about it. But I really want to get to the point where we can get some Q&A. I want to, first of all, thank our host, Tony, and also Sean. Thanks for talking with us about this and letting me rant for a little bit on this. But yeah, let's take some questions from the audience.
Absolutely. Adam, Sean, many thanks for such an informative presentation. Okay, so as you say, we've now got time for a few questions. So first up, can you explain why have improvements in traditional security systems turned APIs into a major attack vector?
Yeah, it's interesting that improvements in cybersecurity have blocked traditional paths that attackers will go down, but that doesn't mean they're just going to walk away with their toys and go home. They're going to look for other ways in. You can't get in through the front door, find a window. And if you can't find a window, there's a chimney somewhere. And if you can't do that, then you go Ocean's 11 and get real creative about it. And I think that's kind of the stage that we're at, is the complicated, intricate, and advanced threats that we're seeing on APIs.
Mhm. Next up, I know this is obviously expected, but have you actually seen the availability of automated attack tools increasing the volume of threats?
Sean and I will laugh first and then say yes, and we'll shake our heads sadly, right, Sean?
Yeah, like we said we weren't going to say the word, so but yeah, there's absolutely the automated world that we exist in today. I think we see that number, and I've seen multiple presentations where really like automation has taken over human interaction in a lot of our applications and our sites these days, and so. And I think we're just going to see that increase dramatically over the next several years, especially with the innovations of technology and where we're headed. But yes, so it's some of the advancements in technology has been fantastic for what we can do from application development and from Our even our own security automation tools that we build in AWS, it also is available to threat actors, and it gives them a much larger playground of tools and resources to use when it comes to the attacks that we're seeing. And I'm sure Adam's very similar, probably from you as well.
Yeah, very much AI and now agentic
Tony,
AI
you
for
said
automation. Yeah,
We did it, Sean. We did it. We didn't say it. So our goal here,
Yeah.
Tony,
that was
we're
what you
playing
were
a trick
avoiding,
on
was
you.
it? Yeah.
Our goal was to never either of us say artificial intelligence or AI. And so since you said it first, we get to claim victory. So
Okay.
but we
Okay.
appreciate you taking the bait.
I did. I did. Okay. So agentic AI, it's out there. Yeah, things are happening. Um, Now, what ways has this greater application complexity made it harder for organizations to maintain visibility? You did touch on visibility. Just tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the difference between having a single goldfish in a small bowl and having a massive ant farm kind of in the background. And that's sorry to pick on you, Sean, but I recently got my first fish, and it's just one, and it's very easy to track where that fish is going and what's it doing because it's singular. But APIs are extremely pervasive. It's kind of like trying to figure out where any individual ant is in your lawn or outside. And they're all over the place, and you can't really always tell which one is which unless you have an advanced system that does that kind of work for you. And that's where we saw the value of Traceable was that we could actually parse through that, recognize the individual APIs, what they were calling, what they were doing. But complexity is hard, and complexity is what we want. It allows you to do cool things quick. And so that's kind of the basis of our relationship with AWS as well. AWS has enabled us to get to that level of complexity.
Yeah, I'd also add one of the things that we've been trying to do on the AWS side is isolate your application as to where that traffic is entering, right? And so I mentioned a few times the front door of your application, trying to be, we're trying to push customers into like CloudFront or having a centralized point where, that north-south traffic is coming in and out of. And one of the things I love is when customers actually, so we have a service release or feature we launched, which is basically locks down your VPC to CloudFront being kind of the sole entry point. And what that does is I love when customers isolate their front door with CloudFront, and then they turn on something like Traceable, and it just like lights up like a Christmas tree the number of APIs that they have that they have available to them. And so it like giving that customers that observability is super enlightening when we actually take a look at it for the first time and realize like what they have, and now that they can finally centralize where they're going to gather all that data. And so it's something like again, I could talk for hours about that. It's really exciting for us to see like helping customers isolate and then get observability and just the like aha moment of when that button gets clicked and turned on and they start to see the data flow through.
Okay, now we're running out of time, but I'm trying to squeeze a couple more questions in. How can organizations identify the best tool for the specific security threats that they face?
That's a great question, and I think part of it is really truly understanding your own infrastructure, truly understanding what you need. Obviously, Sean and I have some vested interest in where we think they should look, but I would encourage people to go out and find industry groups that talk about things like this. Look for talks at different security expos. AWS reInvent is one. We have one coming up this fall for Harness and Traceable called Unscripted. But really, any of those, RSA. I really love B-sides groups that talk about the details of this kind of stuff, and educating yourself as a community is super important.
Yeah, I'd also add to, a lot of our teams that we work with are probably under-resourced and overworked security teams. And so it is hard a lot of times to try like multiple services in there. But what I do see a lot of customers doing is, within AWS, we have several tools that are available, both native and third party. And a lot of those come with free trials. And so we see a lot of times customers, having a traditional vendor maybe in place and then putting another vendor behind them. I'm sure, Adam, you've seen this before. Will you sit behind maybe another API vendor? And that really helps expose like what might be missed and helps like evaluate vendors against each other. So.
Okay. Now, I know you mentioned doing an API audit when you're getting started, but just still worth reiterating. What's the easiest way to get started using solutions from Traceable and AWS?
Yeah, I mean the simplest thing for us is for an existing AWS customer who is already using some of these edge products. It's a pretty quick process. You would need to talk to us about it, obviously, and actually engage with one of our technical SMEs. But we can literally take existing logs and that are passing through the boundary and analyze those and let people know what's there at the very least, and then dive deeper into some of that. Really, it's a matter of lifting up the fridge that you haven't moved for 20 years and seeing what's underneath it is going to give you a good idea of what's there.
Okay.
Yeah, so same with us. I'd say, it's free to try CloudFront and AWS WAF to just turn those on. The beauty of what we have with Traceable is we can just feed them just log files that go right to them, and they can do that analysis there. The other thing is that it's a fairly seamless lambda edge script that they give you, and you just drop that in there, and it suddenly instantly will route some of that data back to Traceable that they can start to give you that evaluation process. So a lot easier than it used to be in years of having to change architecture or re-implement code. So we're excited about how easy it is for customers to try this, and evaluate the performance of it.
Excellent. Now, unfortunately we're running out of time. So thank you so much, Adam, Sean, for sharing your insights and expertise today. And thanks to our sponsors, Traceable and AWS. I also want to thank you for taking time out of your day to attend the session. And I trust today's discussion has provided some useful data points for you to enable your organization to address starting your API security journey and accelerating secure innovation with Traceable and AWS. We hope to see you again at one of our upcoming events. For Information Security Media Group, I'm Tony Morbin, and thank you once again, Adam and Sean.